and thank you so much for joining me today. And today we have another episode of Understanding Your Teen from the Inside Out. Again, my name is Denise Takachi, and I'm a certified parent coach. And so today we're going to talk about brain science, which is something that I find fascinating. And it's important for you as parents and caregivers to understand the development of your teen's brain, because I think that a lot of times we're expecting our teenagers to think like adults when in actuality they cannot do so because their brains are just not developed to the point where they can do it. So we're going to have just a little bit of discussion about brain science. And one of the things that I want to introduce to you is a term that was developed by Daniel Siegel called mindsight. And mindsight is our ability to see inside our own mind and the mind of another with curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. So being able to develop empathy and compassion toward your teen. So we want our children to feel seen by us as parents and even as adults. And we want them our children want to be understood without judgment, without fear. And we also have to understand too that our children's brains continually developed up until the age of 25. And there are that part of their brain that we as adults and parents and caregivers so want to be developed won't be fully developed until they're 25 years old. So we have to take that into consideration when we're communicating. Now, remember, the goal of parenting a teenager is connection. Our teens are not going to respond until they feel connected. And they won't feel connected if they feel that they're going to be judged, or if they feel that there's no empathy or compassion on their parents or caregivers' part. They want to feel safe. And so if your biggest concern is, hey, my teen never comes to me and talks to me, and as a licensed professional counselor, that's one of the things that parents bring their kids to me for, lack of communication. Their kids won't talk to them, right? Well, there's reasons behind that. You as a parent, you as a caregiver have to really be able to kind of take a step back and reflect. So I'm going to ask you in a few minutes to reflect on a couple of things. Okay. So going back to that concept of feeling seen. All right. Feeling seen is the prerequisite to feeling safe. Right? Think about situations that you've been in where you felt that you haven't been seen. Right? How did that make you feel? Now I want you to take that feeling, and I want you to be able to understand that that's probably what your teen is going through too, and what your teen is feeling. So it's very important for you to be able to look back and reflect a lot on yourselves and what might be going on for you as a parent, what's triggering you, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And so when we do feel safe, we are able to develop, we can integrate, we can grow, and we can thrive. And that's what you want for your teenager, isn't it? So mindsight then is our ability and our willingness, because we have to be willing not only to engage in self-reflection, but also to be able to change. Because unless you parent unless you, caregiver, are willing to change how you're interacting, okay? You cannot expect your teenager to change. So if the yelling and the screaming is not working for you, okay, what do you need to change about your interactions with your teen that will get the results that you want? Okay, so that's not a judgment on your parenting skills. It's what are you willing to change about how you are parenting and how you're interacting with your teen? Because it should not be on your teen to be the only one that has to make changes. We all have to make changes, especially when our relationships are not working. Remember, relationships, even parent-child relationships, are a two-way street. And so if you are asking them to change things about themselves, what are you willing to change about yourself? And so willingness is very important. So in my therapy practice, I use therapy called dialectical behavioral therapy. And I dig in and explore with my teenage clients, are they willing to change or are they being willful? And when you are willful, that's you planting your feet and saying, I don't need to change. I'm not the one that's the problem. Okay? So you have to be willing to do some self-reflection and to make some changes. So with Mindsight, it's our willingness to see beneath the behavior, what's going on that is causing the behavior. My definition of a behavior is a reaction to something. It's an action that is a reaction to something. So we have to find out what is that underlying cause, because we can change behaviors if we understand what the cause is. Okay? If we demand that our children and our teens change their behaviors without understanding what's causing them, and that cause is still going to be there, we're going to be unsuccessful. So we have to be willing to dig a little bit deeper in discovering what the cause is. Discovery is a good word. All right. Being curious and discovery are two good words that I think all parents should be willing to use and understand, because it's that discovery process that's going to help you understand your teen better. Okay. And so we're willing to see beneath the behavior and truly get curious about what's going on within our teens. And that means our teens' thoughts and our teens' perception that's creating those undesirable expressions. Okay. So when our teens are behaving in ways that are upsetting to us, we have to understand, we have to be willing to dig deep. What is going on for my teenager? Because remember, the brain is not fully developed. And our teenagers will have that struggle to be able to identify exactly what's going on for them. So we have to help them. Okay. So there's a difference. It's help me to understand what's going on for you versus why do you keep doing that? What's wrong with you? All right. So take each of those sentences separately. Help me to understand what's going on for you. Now, what are your thoughts about this, the way you would say this? What's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? Which way do you think your teen is going to respond to you better? Probably the first way, because we're showing curiosity and we're engaging with empathy and compassion. And when we can do that, our teens are going to feel safe and they're going to want to open up to you. Okay. And isn't that what you really want? Okay. So we have some conditioned beliefs about children in general. And I want you to do a little more self-reflecting. Yes, we're doing self-reflecting. And I know that for many of you, that might be a challenge. But when you can do some self-reflecting, all right, you're more open and willing to see what you can change that'll improve the relationship. And I'm going to keep harping on that because I think that's really important. How did you learn to be a parent? Good question, right? Because there's no books anywhere. You don't like when you're given this beautiful bundle of joy in the hospital, you're not given any kind of owner's manual or anything. We didn't study. There's no courses anywhere to teach us how to be parents. How did you learn how to be parents, right? You learn from your parents, who learn from their parents, who learn from their parents, and it's a generational thing. Okay, sometimes I get ahead of myself in my brain and the words don't always come out right, but it's a generational thing. So you learn from your parents how to be parents. And if your parents were not very empathetic or compassionate, that even though you'll probably say that I'm going to be different from my parents, chances are you won't. Chances are you're going to be slipping in some of those habits that make it hard to connect with your child or your teen. Okay. So here's some conditioned beliefs that we've all had. All right. So the first one is children are born bad and they must be taught how to be good. Children don't know what they need, think, feel, and dream for. Children need to be controlled, and children are here to be quiet and in service toward adults. Even though you may not have some of those beliefs, many parents and caregivers have been conditioned to believe that, meaning society has taught them or their parents and families have taught them. So these are conditioned beliefs. Conditioned beliefs can be changed. So if you have any of these, take a deep breath and know that you can change those beliefs once you have more facts. Okay. Another conditioned belief is the lack of awareness and information. Okay. Not being aware of your teen's brain development creates an incongruence in our parenting. So if you don't understand how the brain develops, you're not going to be able to parent on your child's developmental level. And that's really important. Adults tend to expect children to be able to exist and deliver behaviors that are impossible for their development. So if they don't have the capacity to reason as an adult would, is it fair to expect them to do so? And my answer would be no. All right. So understanding and having that information, and that's what this video is going to give you a little bit about that information. All right. So lacking information on our children's brains development and what they need to thrive. Remember, we want our kids to thrive. We want them to develop into these fantastic adults. Okay. So we need to be able to understand where they are in their development and in their brain development. So our empathy, our secure attachment within ourselves and our teens, and our longing to understand, it grows. It helps our child's brain to grow, because if we can do the things to help them to develop, their brains grow. So it's your fear that inhibits growth and delays the development of the child's emotional regulatory centers and the prefrontal cortex, because those are the parts of the brain that is where the thinking, the critical thinking, the decision making, the emotional regulation occurs. And the brain develops those parts of the brain. Our children are not, no human being is born with the ability to do that. So we have to understand that. So we can kind of divide the brain into three sections: the low brain, the middle brain, and the high brain. The low brain occurs from birth to age 3. And it's that part of the development where the body's main focus is on development. Physical coordination is developing. Children are constantly seeking safety and taking in their environment. It's almost like a sponge. I'm sure you've heard that term before. Okay. They're learning patterns and language. When they're stressed, this age range cannot follow verbal cues. They have zero impulse control, and they're 100% dependent on co-regulation to calm the bodies. And I'm going to do a separate video on co-regulation. They need co-regulation to calm their bodies overwhelmed and to contain their emotional experience without reacting. So I'm also going to do a separate video on the nervous system. Okay. So when young humans, or actually any of us humans, are stressed, we go into that fight or flight mode. And that's nervous system. That's our nervous system reacting. And a child who's under the age of 3, they just do not have that ability to understand you when they're having their tantrum because they're upset and they have these big emotions and they don't know what to do with them. They don't understand the concept of calm down, or if you don't calm down, we're leaving. Okay. They cannot understand that concept because they do not, if they knew how to calm down, they would. Okay. They need you to co-regulate and show them how to calm down. So when you're able to stay calm and just be present, and in your calmness and your presence, your child will learn to regulate, self-regulate, and calm down. Okay. So they need you. They have they have zero impulse control. So a 3-year-old and under cannot do that. All right. So please remember that. So the middle brain, that development occurs between ages 3 and 7. So feelings and emotions are the main development focus here. Children are learning how to contain their emotions and identify their feelings. The child is still completely dependent on you for co-regulation when they're stressed. The middle brain holds our emotional regulatory centers and our impulse control. So that's the age where kids are learning how to develop impulse control. So they're just beginning to develop impulse control and will require constant warmth, empathy, modeling, and compassion to fully develop. Okay. So again, they need to see your impulse control, your ability to control impulses in order for them to learn to do it. They need your empathy, your compassion. They need your presence there. Okay, because when you're in that state, you're helping their brain to develop. The middle brain operates on the alpha and theta brain wavelengths, and that might be too much if you're not sciencey, and I'm sort of sciencey, depends on what it is. And these are similar to a hypnotic state. Our belief systems are formed during this time. So supportive and life-enhancing beliefs are formed when the system feels safe and calm. Okay. When we're talking about the system, we're talking about the home environment. Okay. We're talking about the neighborhood that the child is in, maybe the school, the child's environment, the system. Okay. When it's safe, when a child feels safe at home, when the home is not chaotic, when the home is calm, all right, that's how they develop their supportive and life-enhancing beliefs. Limiting beliefs, those beliefs that prevent us from doing our very best, are formed when the system does not feel safe. And the brain is stuck in the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is that part of the brain that's fight or flight. Okay. So when there's constant stress in the home, okay, when the child doesn't feel safe, the amygdala, which controls stress, fear, aggression, and shame, and the hippocampus, which controls memory, they get engaged. Now I want you to think about this. And this has to do with trauma as well, experience traumatic events in life, okay? But this is the same thing that happens for those who have been in a car accident or in a violent situation. That part of our brain is the fight or flight center. It activates the amygdala, it activates, okay? And so when there's that constant stress, the constant fear, that constant feeling of not being safe, that part of the brain is always in action. Okay. So think about a fire alarm. If you've ever been in or even a car alarm or some type of alarm that goes off and that just keeps going, and going and going. That's what it feels like when there's constant chaos and stress in the home. It's that part of the brain. And this has to happen. This happens to you as well as a parent or caregiver. When you are triggered by something where your body is reacting because you don't feel safe, right? That part of the brain kicks in, and it's like the reasoning part of your brain kind of shuts down because the amygdala is taking over. It's preparing for fight or flight because there's no safety there. Okay. But that's what it feels like. So that's why it's important for our children to feel safe. Okay. So now the high brain, that occurs. Guess what the ages are for this? Ages 7 to 25. Yes, 25. So beginning at age 7, if the brain has integrated fully in a warm and safe environment, the prefrontal cortex, or the front part of the brain, which is what we need, begins to develop. The frontal cortex does not truly take flight until the teenage years, when the teenage brain is restructuring itself and experience a rapid die-off of any old synapses and neurons, and it's a rebirth of neural pathways. There's a great book that I'm going to put in either the comments or the information below the video. It's called Brainstorm by Daniel Siegel, and it's an excellent resource for you to read about the teenage brain. Okay. So what happens with the good old prefrontal cortex? Well, probably all the things we want our teenagers to engage their brain for them to do when they engage their brain. Foresight and consideration of the future, understanding of cause and effect, problem-solving strategies, organizing thoughts, inhibiting behaviors or violent behaviors, impulse control and delayed gratification, emotional self-regulation, psychological flexibility, focusing of attention, understanding reasoning, ability to follow direction and clarity, okay, the abilities to switch from what they want to what you want. So if you're thinking that your child doesn't want to do what you want to do, could it be that their prefrontal cortex does not give them the ability to do that because that part of the brain has not fully developed? Think about that. Let's see, what else does this wonderful part of our brain do? The ability to follow directions with clarity, we talked about. The ability to switch from what they want to what you want or what is needed in the moment for well-being of all. Do you ever think about, why can't my teen just understand that picking up the whatever they spilled is on the floor is a safety issue? or thinking ahead, cleaning up, things like that. They may not have the ability to do so because that part of the brain is not fully developed. Okay. The ability to follow multiple sequential directions, such as put your shoes on, put your coats on, grab your lunch bag, get your school books, and get on the bus. This is not activated until a child is at least 11 years old, and only if the child has developed within warmth and security. So if you are in a chaotic environment as your child's growing up, chances are those parts of the brain are not fully developed, even if the child's a teenager, okay? So the ability to understand hypothetical reasoning, empathize, and truly understand how their actions impact others. So this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, develops properly when the child is in a safe environment. Okay. So if the environment for the child is not safe for whatever reason, whether it's high family conflict, struggle, any type of struggles within in the household or whatever, if the child does not feel safe, that part of the brain just won't develop the way that we would like it to. So it's a warm and safe environment in which that part of the brain will fully develop. Okay. Some other conditioned beliefs. Seeing through a lens of judgment and labels. Staying stuck in labeling behaviors creates a barrier to understand. Okay, so when we come to conclusions about who our child is based on their behaviors, all right, we stunt their growth and we stunt their inability to thrive. So if your child is not picking up or cleaning up their room when you demand that they do that, and you don't understand that it might be because their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, all right, and we label them as lazy. You're so lazy. You never want to pick up your clothes. You never do what I ask. You're just lazy. Okay, think about that label and what effect that label has on that child. That child's not going to thrive because they come to believe that label about themselves. And that's the last thing that you want. And that's the one thing that gets in the way of our children and our teens thriving. So notice if you find yourself attaching a label, whether positive or negative, versus trying to understand where the behaviors are coming from. Okay, most behaviors are because the child does not understand their own feelings. Behaviors are teens' way of trying to get their needs met. Okay, they might be acting out on thoughts about themselves or beliefs about themselves. So when you chose not to try to understand what is going on underneath that behavior and instead label, the connection breaks down. There's no connection there. All right. And that label will stunt your child's ability to thrive. Another conditioned belief has to do with fear and projection. When we witness our child display a quality or behavior that activates the fear center in your brain, which is our limbic system again, that amygdala that involves fight or flight. Okay, we're not able to see clearly, and you, the parent, begin to spiral. Okay, that's called the fear spiral. So if your teenager never wants to do their homework, then you, the parent, start wondering and worrying, My child's never going to do well in school. My child's never going to get into a good college. My child's never going to amount to much of anything. My child just will not be able to survive outside of my home. That's your fear, okay? Because you didn't go deep and do that deep dive into understanding what's going on. Why does, a teenager, what's going on for you? Help me to understand what's going on for you with the schoolwork. What's going on with your desire not to get the homework done? Instead of doing that, your fear and projections jump to, my kid's going to fail. My kid's never going to amount to anything, not going to get into a college, won't be able to get into a good job, get a good job. Okay. Won't have any friends, will be miserable for the rest of their lives. All right. That is your fear being projected on what's going on. Okay. That's why it's so important to get underneath the behavior and work with discovery and curiosity to see what is going on for your child. Okay. I see this in my own practice for a lot of parents who have a high anxiety for whatever's happened to them, whatever's going on for them. And that anxiety gets projected on the kids, and then the kids become very anxious too. All right. So we've got, instead of being anxious of the behaviors, instead of getting all of these scenarios in our brains, we have to go underneath the underlying behavior and figure out what is going on for our teenagers that they're behaving this way. Remember, prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. So when we experience fear in our brain, okay, our amygdala, when that's activated, okay, then we project that fear onto our teenagers. Okay, our bodies get flooded with emotional, non-visual memory when our child displays a behavior that caused us to stress out when we were children. This is called a projection, where you see your child through the lens of any of your own unprocessed emotional memories. It goes hand in hand. And this is where, as a parent coach, I help my parents kind of do a lot of self-reflecting on what's going on for them when they were growing up, because a lot of that can get triggered by your child's behaviors. Another conditioned belief: lack of self-awareness and integration. If we are not seen and understood as children, so if you yourself, parent or caregiver, growing up, felt that you were not seen and that you were not understood, then you do not have the ability to do the same for your children. You can learn how to do that if you are willing to change. Okay. You might struggle accepting who your children are because you struggled with accepting who you were. So when we live without unconditional self-acceptance and self-reflection from a longing to understand, we typically only allow a tiny portion of who we are to be seen. So if you aren't being your authentic self, okay, and you're only letting your child see a little bit of part of who you are, okay, you're not going to be able to see that in your own children and in your own teens, okay? Conditioned and limiting beliefs. So your own core self-perception, your belief system, is usually created within your subconscious at the age of 7 to 9. And to a lesser degree by ages 12 to 14. So if we did not experience our parents or caregiver who displayed any constant willingness to understand us, our thoughts, our mind, our understanding of life, our belief systems, our views, our point of views, then we lived without inner safety. So as a parent, if you weren't brought up that way, you didn't have that inner safety. You didn't have a sense of belonging and a belief that you were loved unconditionally, right? So if you grew up feeling that you weren't loved unconditionally, it's going to be a challenge for you to love your children unconditionally. And so when you cope with those intense feelings associated with those beliefs, those beliefs bring out emotions and feelings like fear and shame and heartbreak, loneliness and anger. Our brain goes into action. When we're developing, our brain serve us two main functions. Okay, what is happening and why? So whenever something is happening, our brain wants to figure out why. And sometimes if we don't have the facts to help us figure that out, our brains will create stories that will give meaning, order, and understanding to why an experience is happening. For instance, and this causes a lot of negative thinking about ourselves. All right. So my parents, as an example, my parents don't seek to understand me because I'm a bad kid. I'm not loved and I am unworthy. And this story, while typically untrue, is less painful and less dangerous to a child who's growing up than admitting that your only source of survival is not capable of understanding you, seeing you, and providing you with psychological safety. What this means is if your child feels that you don't see them, that you don't understand them, okay, they will kind of internalize that. Their brain will kind of internalize that. And they will see themselves as bad kids who are not worthy of love. All right. That's not how we want to see our kids, and that will not help our kids thrive. Our brain kind of mix these stories up to try to understand what's going on. And a lot of times, the stories that our brain develops are not accurate and not factual. Okay. So for instance, I'm going to use, even though we're talking about teens, I'm going to use a story about a 5-year-old. Okay. So a 5-year-old tries to tell the parents a story about why they're hitting their brother, causing their parents to scream at them and force them into their room. This happens every time the child does this. So from this space of panic, the child whose brain is still developing, remember 5-year-old low brain, creates the story that they are bad. There's something wrong with them. That's why they're hitting their kid. I'm a bad kid, so I'm hitting my brother. Remember, at that age, child can't self-reflect. So that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, does not begin until developing until age 7, and development does not end until 25. From that moment on, the child makes sure to avoid trying to explain their actions and learns that using their voice only brings them pain and disconnect. All right. So when we chose not to understand what's going on with our kids, they chose, for safety reasons, not to come to you to tell you anything. So perceiving our children's behaviors through physiological stress, which ignites the center of the brain in the brain and that releases fear-based emotional memory and limiting beliefs, we cannot accurately assess our child. So when you're coming from a place of you feeling unsafe, right? You're not going to be able to understand your kid. When you are constantly being triggered by behaviors because of what happened to you when you were a kid or how your parents responded to you as a child, okay, that doesn't help our kids because we can't as parents understand them. When you're in that state, you're not fully present, and you're viewing the behaviors through a lens of limitation, scarcity, internalized shame, and fear. You're not trying to understand it from your child's point of view. Okay. So with all of these conditioned beliefs, all right, number one, it doesn't make you a bad parent. And number two, if you are willing, you can change those conditioned beliefs. Okay. You can strengthen your mindset. And so how do you do that? Well, notice things about yourself. Do some self-reflection, but notice things about yourself. When you're trying to be so logical, when you need to see things from emotion, all right? Gaslighting your child's experience, all right? These are things that you don't want to do. Never gaslight your child's experience. Okay, that never happened. I never said that versus, you seem to remember that differently. Can you share more about how you remember it? All right. I'm of the belief that being a therapist who uses dialectical behavior therapy, there are two truths. All right. Each person has their own truth, their own perception. So you may have seen it one way and your child sees a situation the other. Okay. So instead of assuming that you are correct, because that we're going to talk about this in another video, that comes from a position of power over parenting. Okay, so power over parenting is not what we want to do here. You want to understand, you want to take that stance of curiosity, and you want to understand and explore with your child how they saw the situation. Okay, how they remember it. All right. Things that you do not want to do. Don't dismiss your child's feelings. Don't be sad. It's no big deal. Yes, it is. You're dismissing your child's feelings. You may not think it's a big deal, but for your child, it could be everything into the world. So when you dismiss feelings, all right, and this has to do also with your child starts crying, you send them to their room. Your child gets angry, you send them to your room. Okay, you push their feelings away. That comes from a position of those big feelings are making you uncomfortable. So you push those feelings away and dismiss them. And when you do that, what you teach your child is that those feelings are bad. Okay? We're humans. We get angry, we get sad, we have negative feelings. So pushing them away just to avoid them is not helpful. You teach your child to push feelings deep down inside. Instead of being curious, instead of allowing them to feel the feeling, because feelings are temporary, they will go away. And sometimes we have to sit and work through that. All right. Invalidating feelings. This is important, especially with teenagers. There's no reason that you should be angry about that right now. I've done everything you wanted this morning. Okay. Invalidating your feeling. You have no right to feel this way. Okay, sure they do. It's their feelings. Just like you have your feelings, they have their feelings. So telling your child that they have no right to feel the way they do, that teaches them not to feel. We are already in a world where people don't know how to feel. And we need more empathy and compassion. And that means being comfortable with feelings, even those negative ones. Okay. Using sarcasm and non-consensual teasing, meaning teasing your kids and when they tell you it's uncomfortable or ask you to stop and you don't do it. Oh, there you go again, crying like the world is ending. Really? How helpful is that? So these are things that you don't want to do. So notice when you are going in those directions, you stop right there. Okay. Look beneath the behavior. Look underneath the behavior. Okay. What are the feelings associated with the behavior? What might the unmet needs be? What might some of the thoughts and beliefs be about that are underlying those behaviors? What are the kids' thoughts or beliefs? What is the context of the situation? Where is the child in their brain development? Okay. Does it have to do with like nervous system regulation? Are they struggling? Is the behavior, is the tantrum due to a big emotion and the child's currently in fight or flight and needs some co-regulation? Okay, so if we go into, all right, understanding, like another thing, what's this? Is there a connection going on? Is the behavior because there's no connection? All right. And most of all, does the child feel safe? But if we can ask ourselves these questions, okay, we can get to the root. So for an example, a child hits you while you're trying to get their pajamas on. What are some of the feelings the child has? Could be disappointed that they had to stop playing, or they could be scared that bedtime will be stressful like usual. What are some of the unmet needs? Child wants connection, safety, play, autonomy. What might be the child's thoughts? Well, mommy's mad at me, mommy's being rough. What are some of the beliefs that the child have? I'm bad, mommy is just not safe. What's the context of the situation? Bedtime started late and the child just turned off the TV. Child is up way past the bedtime. What's the brain? Well, if the child's under, if brain for brain development, if the under the age of 5 and cannot control their impulses, that could be why, right? Anger might lead to aggression. If there's aggression going on, if there's anger, that means somebody's nervous system is in fight or flight and they can't self-regulate. So if there's a temper tantrum, when a child's under the age of 11, they need you 100% to help with co-regulation. They can't come down there by themselves. What's the quality of the secure attachment? Okay, are they being raised in a power over parenting style? That's not what we want. Okay, with lots of screaming and threats. That's not what we want. All right. Another way, we need to catch ourselves. So we want to, number one, we want to catch ourselves when we were being invalidating with emotions, when we're gaslighting, when we're doing those things. We want to be able to look beneath the behaviors. Consider lecturing versus listening. Are you listening or are you lecturing? Do you notice every time that you interrupt your child? Right? Your child's trying to talk to you, have a conversation to you, explain something. Do you keep interrupting? Okay. Yeah, I know it's hot, but you got to put sunscreen on in order to protect your skin. Okay. You know what happened when your uncle didn't wear sunscreen? So if your child's talking about something and you just jump in and interrupt with something else, that's lecturing. That's not listening. You want to listen. Your child needs you to listen. All right. Um, could you ask investigative questions versus listening? Versus lecturing. So if you're getting ready to interrupt with a lecture, ask a curiosity question for more information. Engage your child. All right. Get more information. Resist the urge to capitalize on your child's distress to prove your point. Well, if you had listened the first time, you wouldn't be in this situation. Okay? I told you that if you did that, this would happen. We don't want to do that. Don't be a sportscaster. Oh, I'm sorry. Take the stance of being a sportscaster, all right, or a newscaster. Name it falls under what I call observe and describe. Okay, that's a dialectical behavior term. Observe and describe. Name what you're witnessing to show support for your child develop, because that's the way you develop insight. Help your child develop insight. I see that you're focusing on your teeth brushing. I see how you're going in every tooth. All right. I see you're picking up the dishes and you're putting them away. I wonder what you're going to do next. All right. So play the do and this is more toward younger kids. You probably wouldn't be doing this for a teenager, but if you're working with a teenager, if you have a teenager, you want to observe, hey, I see that you're putting away the dishes. Thank you. So helpful. Okay. Can't versus won't, especially when it comes to your children and it comes to asking them to do things and follow directions. Is it because they can't do it, or is it because they won't do it? All right. So do a check-in. Is what I'm asking my child appropriate for the age and development? Okay. An example would be your body and brain are telling me that you need support cleaning your room right now, and I'm here to be that support. All right. So that's a question you have to ask yourself. Is it because your child can't do it or won't do it? All right. If it's something that they can't do. Now, one thing that, especially with teenagers, sometimes you have to be very specific in what you want them to do. Okay. So instead of go clean your room or yeah, go clean your room. All right. Your definition of a clean room and their definition of a clean room might be two different things. So sometimes you have to be a little more specific in what you need them to do. And how you ask them is important. Are you being respectful or are you demanding? Is there connection? All right. A connected child will more than likely desire to do whatever you need them to do. Okay. And last but not least, you want to show up for yourself. Okay. After all of this conversation we had today, I don't want you to think that you're a bad parent, because you're not. Your parenting comes from a place from your parents' parenting and how you were parented. And you'll find a lot of um, what you're experiencing and what might be triggering for you is because of how you were raised or what happened to you. Maybe your parents shut down your feelings. Okay. And so that's what you learn to do. But you want to be taking care of yourself as a parent. You want to be using I am statements. You want to be intentional in the things that you're doing every day. You want to use reflection about what's going on for you. Okay, so take some time daily and do some reflecting, because when you can do some reflecting, you will start catching yourself being invalidated. You'll start catching yourself being demanding. Okay, you will catch yourself being sarcastic. Those things like that. All right, so these are just some things to help you kind of reflect on things. Again, I'm going to put that book, Brainstorm by Daniel Siegel, either in the comments or down below this video so that you can get it. That's a great read. Make sure you get it and read. Couple of things. If you'd like to explore working with me as a parent coach, okay, I will put my website below. It's not fully up yet. I will also put my, because I'm actually revamping the website, so it's going to be new and improved. But if you're really interested in working with me as a parent coach, I will place my email below. All right, reach out to me. And I'm hoping to get new videos in for you every week with different topics so that you can be, learn to be a more connected parent. And when you're more connected with your teen, you understand your teen from the inside out, all right, you're going to improve the relationship that you have with your teen. And I think that's the most important thing for you to do. All right. So thank you all for listening and watching, and hope to see you next time with a new video. Take care.